that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. And I've seen many searching for it. Let's sing it out. Far and wide, but I know that we're all searching. Only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good. I'll sing it out. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am tonight. It's who I am. It's who I. Let's sing. You are perfect. And you are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to me. You are perfect in all of to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. Perfect in all of your ways. Tell your minds, He is perfect in all of His ways. He is perfect in all of His ways. He is perfect in all of His ways to me. Tell your body, sing it out. He is perfect in all of His ways. He is perfect in all of His ways. He is perfect in all of His ways to me. And He loves me tonight. He loves me. Oh, He loves me. You've been good. You are good. We say you are good to every lie, every lie. We say you are good. You are good tonight. You are good. Oh, you're good tonight. You're good tonight. And you'll be good tomorrow. you'll be good tomorrow. You'll be good to us tomorrow. Surely your goodness and mercy follow behind me. They go before us. Oh, they go before us. And they come behind us. Oh, just let yourself be loved by the Father tonight. You've been good to us. You've been good to us. I don't have to worry, 'cause you go before me. Faith is all I need, so I won't worry. No, I won't worry, 'cause you're going before me. You don't need to worry, 'cause he goes before you. Oh, he's going before you, and he's coming behind you. Oh, his goodness is here tonight. Oh, your goodness, God.
Broken things that happen in our broken world. But just because you choose to redeem them doesn't mean they came from you. So God, we thank you that anything we put in your hands, you choose to redeem. Because that's who you are. You're a redeemer. God, I ask that you would reach into the depths of every heart that's here. That you would reach into the painful places, the dark corners that we don't want others to see. And that as we let you in, you would bring light, that you would shine in every crack and crevice, redeeming, restoring, and making all things new. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, we're a little more family style tonight. We've got several leaders that are out of town, so we invite you to come a little further forward if you would. So we can chat for a little bit. Well, if you didn't know, it happens to be International Women's Day. And when Andrew and I were living overseas, International Women's Day was a huge celebration in the church. You were almost guaranteed that the service would be at least 4 hours long if it was Women's Day, because every woman's choir would sing, there would be special music, there would be special speakers. So I can promise you today on International Women's Day, we will not have a 4-hour long service. No, you don't. No, you don't. Though that would be fun. If you want to wear white and hats, I'd be rather entertained. Well, as I was mentioning, so many of you guys know this. Some of you may have heard. Some of you may just have heard bits and pieces. But Andrew and I did spend time living in Burkina Faso, West Africa, and I have a few stories from there that I want to share with you that all comes to a point, I promise. So just bear with me while we talk about some of these things. Andrew, if you could put up that first picture. That's Andrew's and my engagement picture. It's a little different than most engagement pictures. I would give quite a bit to have that same tan that I have in that picture. That was actually taken at in a village where crocodiles are considered sacred, And so if you go to this particular village and you pay a fee, they'll bring a bunch of live chickens out and they'll throw them out over the water, and you'll see all these crocs just jump out of the water to fight over this chicken that's been thrown into the air. And then they'll kind of draw them out so that you can either sit on the crocodile or hold its tail like that. And for those of you who have watched National Geographic or Animal Planet and have seen how quickly crocodiles can attack, I can assure you we were in no danger whatsoever, because that guy off to the left had a stick in his hand, and if the crocodile gets a little squirrely, he'd just tap it on the nose with the stick. That was the extent of our security. As of yet, there have been no fatalities that we know of. For those of you that have never heard of Burkina Faso or never been there, it's a small country in West Africa where the Sahara Desert meets the tropical areas in Central Africa. So it's not quite all the way desert and not quite all the way tropical. It's the third poorest country in the world. That kind of fluctuates depending on, different things that are going on in the world, but at least when we were living there, it was the third poorest country in the world. But despite that poverty, they had some of the most wonderfully generous people that I've ever met in my entire life. And we could tell you story after story of just unbelievable generosity that it's just, you talk about the story in the Bible of the widow who gave just the 2 coins. That happens like every day. It's so beautiful. But the American government, as well as missions organizations, classify Burkina Faso as a hardship post if you're sent there, because life there is not easy, for some of the reasons that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But for those of you that are on your phones, out of the 256 countries and territories that have internet access, Burkina Faso is ranked number 256. So that gives you a little taste of some of the frustrations that you could have there. Yes, definitely room for improvement. You can only go up from there. But because Burkina Faso is near the Sahara Desert, it's not far from the equator. Because of that, it is incredibly hot. If you could put up, I think the next picture? Yes, that one. So the heat is one of the first things that I noticed when I walked off the plane, and that's kind of a joke because you don't actually see giraffes through the airplane window. But the very first time I stepped off the airplane in Burkina Faso in 2004, as I stepped off of the plane, no, there wasn't a giraffe, but it felt as if God had turned on this giant hair dryer and blew it directly at the airplane, because I was hit with this blast of dry, hot air. If you ever visit Burkina Faso, we'd recommend doing it in the winter months, because that's when it's cold season, and by cold season, I mean 70 degrees. The all-time low temperature that was ever recorded in Burkina, so I have heard, was up north in the desert in wintertime in the middle of the night, and that's when it got to 59 degrees. The norm is much, much hotter than that. In hot season, it can get up to 120 degrees in the shade. In fact, one time I was out in a village with a work team further south in Burkina during hot season. There you go, that's where it is. We were further south, and we brought a digital thermometer that we sat out in the sun in the middle of the day to see just how hot it was. And all we know is that the thermometer got up to 139 and then blacked out. So it gets really, really hot. All of us do cook while we're there. So as you can imagine, air conditioning is something that we're all looking to have a little more of in our lives. But electricity is incredibly expensive in Burkina. And so for those of us that were lucky enough to have air conditioners, we normally had them in just a few rooms in the house, and we normally only ran them at night to make it more comfortable for sleeping. But even at that, it was still expensive. So most of the missionary families that we knew had an air conditioner unit in one bedroom. And, all the kids would pile onto mats on the floor in that one bedroom so that everyone could sleep in the air conditioning. And it was quite a big deal to have to sleep without the air conditioning. Andrew and his siblings often tell stories of times when they were younger and they would get put to bed in the room that had the air conditioning. And the rule was that you'd been put to bed, and so you were to go to bed. And mom and dad would go and, talk or do whatever it was they wanted to until it was time for them to go to bed. But I've heard several stories of Lindsay, the middle child, being the rule follower and trying to stay in her bed, and Andrew and his youngest sister, Diana, raising quite a ruckus and trying to bend the rules and play just a little longer into the night. And Diana tells a story of one time that she and Andrew were roughhousing, and as she was running across the room, she froze mid-pose as to why the air conditioner why it was punishment to not have the air conditioner. If you saw the state of the generators that ran the city, though. You can put up the next picture, Andrew. The whole city was run on these very few generators that looked like they were held together with bubble gum and rubber bands. So it was a miracle that anybody could run air conditioning anywhere in the entire city, but sometimes we were able to have it. But those unfortunate nights when there was a power cut and the electricity turned off and there was no air conditioning and no fans, the only salvation you had was the tile floor, like you see in that picture. That was actually the guest house, the upstairs in our house, so that wasn't where we lived, but we had similar floors. So if the power cut in the middle of the night, your best strategy was probably to hop in the shower and grab a wet towel and lay it down on the tile floor and lay on top of the wet towel and hope to absorb some of the cool from the tile until the power eventually came back on. Our family was fortunate enough to have a small generator, so if the power cut in the middle of the night, Dad would get up and he'd walk outside and he'd start the generator, and with that, we could run a couple of fans. No air conditioning, but a couple of fans. So that was at least a little better than it could have been. But those power outages were sometimes longer than just a few minutes. In fact, there were times where there would be stretches of 12 hours or longer without any sort of electricity. There was one time my mom was trying to give final exams at the international school when the power cut, and so she walked around to all of her students fanning them until they finished, and then anytime a student finished, they had to walk around and fan their fellow classmates until the test was done. So not only is it hot in Burkina Faso, there are power cuts frequently, especially in hot season. But the third thing I wanted to talk to you about was some of the food that we encountered while we were there. So you can throw up the next slide. In that top left corner, you can see those are big bowls of rice. Some of it's plain rice, some of it is called riz gras, which is just fattened rice with some vegetables and things. And in the way back, there's some big bowls with goat in them. So that was a good one. Fattened rice and goat meat is excellent. But the other picture next to there, that's me and two of my friends, my sophomore year of high school. We went to an orphanage over our spring break to serve the kids there. And while we were there, we had to eat whatever the kids were eating. So that meant for breakfast, we had something called bouillie, which is like porridge. And then for dinner, we had rice and peanut sauce, which was tolerable. But this picture was taken at lunchtime. So I was I was forcing myself to look pleasant in that picture because lunch was something called toe, which has nothing to do with your actual toes or the toes of anything. It's just grain that's been pounded down into a powder and then boiled until it gets to this gelatinous mashed potato / jello consistency so that you can break pieces off and dip it in sauce, which is tolerable sometimes, but we happen to have toe with okra sauce, which is a lot like snot. So this was snot with gelatinous, bland whatever that we had to have for lunch. That was not quite my favorite. And the bottom left, I, thank goodness, did not have to eat. That's one of my dad's favorite pictures to pull out, but that's a bowl of spaghetti topped with a local delicacy in the south of Burkina, which is caterpillars. Yeah. My dad, having been to Burkina Faso several times before we moved there, knew that this is some of what we were getting ourselves into. When you're in the capital city, we could eat things that were very similar to what you have here, like hamburgers and tacos and lasagna, but all of that had to be made completely from scratch because if you went to the grocery store, there were no hamburger buns to buy, and there were no hamburgers to purchase either, or taco shells or anything. So there were some things that were really great because they were made entirely from scratch, but there are other things from the States that we just couldn't quite replicate over there. They weren't necessarily bad, they just were really different. And one of the things that my dad and I especially struggled with was the milk. Your options were to either have powdered milk, or there were these boxes that would sit on the shelf in the grocery store for indefinite periods of time that you just kind of shake up and then it was milk. I could put some of it on cereal. I could never bring myself to drink that, not quite. We missed milk so much that the first time we came back to the States, we were staying in a house here, and Dad and I both woke up early because of the jet lag, and we got in the car and drove to the Lantana Acme at like 6:30 in the morning and bought a half gallon of milk and shared it in the parking lot because we had missed milk for so long. But as I said, because my dad knew some of this that we were getting ourselves into, different foods that we were going to eat when we were in the village, different things that we wouldn't be able to get when we were living in the capital city, he went ahead and as we were moving to Burkina, packed 22 jars of Jif peanut butter in our container so that we could have a jar of peanut butter for every month, knowing that sometimes on those days when you were especially homesick, a scoop of peanut butter on an apple or some crackers would be just enough of a taste of home to tide you over until we could have someone bring some gifts over, some more familiar things. So all to say, there were some great things about living in Burkina, but there were some challenging things about living in Burkina. But my perspective on my experience in Burkina changed one day when I met the lady in this next picture. This is Ambassador Jackson. She is was the United States ambassador to Burkina Faso, and she also happened to be an incredibly gifted pianist. And so when our school did musicals, she was the accompanist. And she offered to have the entire cast of the musical over to her home so that we could practice the songs a little more as we were getting closer to the performance. So one day, my senior year, we were all loaded up into the school van, and we went over to the embassy and went through all the security checks and had the van, the sweep underneath the van and everything you needed, and finally got in to Ambassador Jackson's home. But when I walked in, I realized that though her home was in Burkina Faso, it was not quite like my home in Burkina Faso. And I noticed this not just in her home, but in the homes of all the other embassy families that I was visiting. Because you see, in Ambassador Jackson's home, there wasn't just an air conditioner in one room. There was an air conditioner in every room, sometimes multiple air conditioners. In fact, one embassy home that we visited even had air conditioners in their pantry that were running to keep the food at the right temperature, which was just beyond anything I had experienced. But yes, multiple air conditioners, and though we had to go through power cuts, Ambassador Jackson did not have to do that because the embassy homes came equipped with these giant generators, and they probably weren't that giant, but they were giant compared to our little generator that would give us emergency power in the middle of the night. There was very little at her home that was interrupted when the power cut. And even though there were things that we longed for, tastes of America that we waited for until someone brought over a package of Oreos in a suitcase, Ambassador Jackson's pantry, like the other embassy families, had plenty of American things in there. Boxes of Captain Crunch and Oreos and turkey at Thanksgiving. If you've never had to go through a Thanksgiving with chicken instead of turkey, not by choice, but because you have no option, then you don't know the disappointment that can come with Thanksgiving sometimes. But Ambassador Jackson and those families had turkey that they could eat. Seems like a little thing, but their food was a totally different reality than what I had experienced. Because you see, an ambassador is someone who lives in a foreign land under the realities of their homeland. Ambassador Jackson and the other families associated with the embassy may have lived in Burkina Faso, but they were living with an American reality, not a Burkina Faso reality. And the same can be said of us. You can put up the next slide. There we go. 2 Corinthians 5:20 tells us that we are Christ's ambassadors. And as I said in the text message that was sent out to you earlier today, that's more than just a title. It's a game changer. I think for a long time we've thought of being Christ's ambassador as some sort of title that you represent Christ in this world, so you have to behave really well, and you have to set a good example, and you have to do good things because you're representing Christ. And I don't think that's wrong. I just think it's incomplete. Because Ambassador Jackson wasn't just representing American values in Burkina Faso. Wherever she went in that country, she was under the American rights and privileges, not the rights and privileges of the Burkina Faso. Her home was different. Her life was different. Everything about her was different because she lived under an American reality because she was the ambassador. So as Christ's ambassadors, we're called not just to carry this title and to walk around and saying, I'm an ambassador of Christ, but we're supposed to carry with us the realities of the kingdom wherever we go. I don't think I had ever really realized that before. And I got to thinking, how would my life be different if I lived walking around knowing that I was carrying the kingdom with me? And as we're in this Lenten season and we're focusing on the cross and what really happened at the cross, I think it's important for us to consider not just what happened, but the fact that we carry those things with us every day. You weren't just saved so that you could be saved at the end of time on Judgment Day. You were saved for it to change your life right here and right now, to have heavenly realities, just as Jesus lived. As he prayed, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. If Jesus could pray that, then it could be possible for us. And so in just a few minutes, we're going to have some statements and some verses that'll come up on the screen. They're statements of what is afforded to you because of the cross. And I want us to resist the temptation to take a moment to duck out to the bathroom or to surf Instagram or to check out. Each statement and verse will only be up on the screen for a few minutes, and there aren't that many of them. But I want us to take some time to just meditate on each of those statements and those verses. For the few seconds that it's up there, soak in that truth. Pray and thank God for that truth. Or ask him to help you to experience that in a new way tonight in your everyday life, whatever that might mean for you. If you want to sit, you can sit. If you want to kneel, you can kneel. If you want to walk, you can walk. However you best reflect on that. But there'll be some music playing in the background. We'll have those verses up on the screen, and then we'll wrap it up together in just a few minutes. So how does that change things? I know how it changed things for me, but how does that change things for you? Knowing that you're an ambassador and what being an ambassador can mean. Yeah. There's a responsibility that comes with that. Right. And I think that's the one thing I would change about that metaphor, because Ambassador Jackson carried those realities with her, but she didn't bear any responsibility to share her Captain Crunch with me or give me a generator just like she had. Bill Johnson says that the Holy Spirit is in me for my sake, but he is upon me for yours. It's not supposed to be something that you just hold on to, but there is a responsibility to give that away. Exactly. Exactly. It's a privilege, not a burden. Any other thoughts? Well, my gift to you this Wednesday night is that you get out a little early and you get to go home with hopefully some new thoughts and some new realities to consider, knowing that you are going out from here carrying the kingdom with you, carrying more than just a label, but carrying the privilege of bringing heaven to earth for the people around you. Just a few reminders, if you grab a bulletin on the way out, that we have our date night, paint night this Saturday. It'll be from 6:30 to 9, so you can get those tickets but with the information on the bulletin. And that we also have our bowling night coming up on Saturday, April 1st. It's going to be a family bowling night for everybody in the church family to come and join us. Just $8, and that includes your shoe rental, everything that you would need. So it's going to be quite a blast. And the sign-up information, as I said, is in the bulletin out there. If you didn't get a chance to join us on Sunday night for the Money Life study, you can still join us this Sunday. That's at 6:45, and it goes just until 8. We got some really great tools and some conversations started, and we wouldn't want you to miss out on that. So please feel free to join us Sunday at 6:45. And we'll see you Sunday morning. Yes or no? I could have given you dozens of stories. I was focusing my stories. You know, I did have some fun digging through all of our old pictures to find some of those ones, so there will always be more. There are always more stories. We do. Have a good night, everyone. We'll see you Sunday.